Welcome everybody to tonight's event, Accessible Reading Technology, where we are and where we're going. My name is Lauren Hedges. I'm the Managing Director of Windsor Hackforge, and I'm so happy to have all of you here, especially Ioana, who's going to be doing our presentation tonight. Before we hear from her, I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of some of the ground rules here. So during the presentation, please feel free to put any questions or comments you may have in the chat. I will relay those throughout the presentation at appropriate times. So if I'm not asking your question right away, it's not because I didn't see it. It's just because I'm waiting for a moment to jump in and ask it. We are recording tonight's event, so be aware of that. The recording will be available on YouTube following the event. I don't know exactly when, but sometime soon. So you'll be able to review it there if you would like. If this is your first Hackforge event, welcome. We are a grassroots tech nonprofit located in Windsor, Ontario. We focus on building community and connections through, with, around, and about technology. So this week for National Accessibility Week here in Canada, we have a range of programming focused on the intersection of technology and accessibility. I am so excited for tonight's event. I am a lover of audiobooks. I am a lover of physical books. And I just love the fact that technology enables more people to experience reading in one form or another. There's no such thing as too many stories. So I'm really happy to be able to get more of them out there. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Ioana. I will keep an eye on the chat and everything else. If you need anything, please feel free to send me a message. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Hello, everyone. It is a real pleasure to be here and share my passion for CELA and for technology with you. A few words about me. I have been working with CELA for 3 years now as a peer trainer. That basically means that I am responsible there for helping develop instructional material and webinars for how to use the various technologies, and in conjunction with CELA content. I also give tech support and support in general to other member libraries. But the nice thing, what makes this work for me very meaningful, is that I myself am a CELA user. I am blind since birth and have been using CELA services since I was a kid. So it's nice to be on both sides of the curtain, so to say, as a beneficiary of the service and working with this service. And today, I thought we will discuss, as you probably read in the description, a few words about CELA and what we provide in terms of accessible reading services. Then we'll discuss accessible reading technologies, what kinds there are and where they're going in the future, what are the future tendencies, and also we will have some demos of various apps and reading technologies. I've pre-recorded those, so we have hopefully fewer technical surprises. Live demos are always a bit tricky. And then I'll discuss a bit what in terms of implications in accessible publishing and what role CELA plays on that front. And I will pause for questions, I think, between each big section. After we talk about CELA, we'll have a little break to discuss if there are any questions that accumulate. Then after the reading technologies, I'll leave some room for questions. And then at the end, after I discuss accessible publishing and the research projects that are underway, we can talk some more. I want to make sure that I'm not just overloading you and talking nonstop for an hour. I think that won't be the best experience for anyone. So now that you have a bit of an overview, let's get started. And why is it I see. So, what is CELA? CELA stands for Center for Equitable Library Access, and this is a comprehensive accessible library service providing over 1 million books, magazines, and newspapers to about more or less 3 million people with print disabilities living in Canada. CELA is a national not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to also support public libraries uh, as they provide accessible library services and collections to their patrons. And, and of course, we want to champion the fundamental right of Canadians with print disabilities to access media and reading materials in the format of their choice. And I will discuss the various formats soon. Our services ensure this way that people with print disabilities across the country are more able to fully participate in learning and work and community life in general. So, what are print disabilities? We keep mentioning them. Many people might assume that print disability is equivalent to visual disability, and that is not true. I mean, indeed people with a visual disability fit into this category, but there are also others, such as learning disability, such as dyslexia, for example, as well as physical disabilities that make it hard, for example, to turn the pages of a book or to hold a book, or even to use their eyes to track the writing on a book. So all these scenarios will enable somebody to have access to CELA content, and that's of course for free. So who can register for CELA accounts? Persons with print disabilities, of course, they are our main clientele, and they are ultimately the beneficiaries. They can register themselves online. Optionally, also, they can add, for example, if some may be overwhelmed by the whole technology and the logistics of ordering and adding books and managing their account. If that's the case, they can add a designate. A person that could be their relative or a friend, or even sometimes the librarians in public libraries help out, and so they can have a designate to help them manage their library account. But that's not the only type of account. We also have an account type that's called the educator account, and that is for educators for post-secondary institutions and also for K-12. So basically any teacher that is providing education to persons with print disabilities can have access to a CELA account so that they can order books for their students. Finally, we have a client access support account, and that is for any other professionals that work with people with print disabilities, such as, for example, vision loss rehabilitation providers, or people that work in long-term care residences. Basically, anybody that works professionally with people with print disabilities can have a client access support account. And there are more information you can find about the terms of use and the way to use the accounts, because they're slightly different from one type to the other. You can find more info on our webpage. Why did this not move ahead? Oh, I think we can move. Okay, so content sources. What kind of content can you find in CELA? Oh, now it went twice. Okay, we're going back. I think there is a lag between my Braille display and speaking of reading technologies. Beautiful. Yes, back on track. So the content sources, what type of content sources? We have a few ways to acquire materials. One is sometimes we order new original productions from accessible producers. We have a collaboration with the US-based organization called Bookshare, and they have different publishing deals with publishers so that they get their files from the publishers directly and they transform them automatically in accessible texts. It's mainly texts. Now they're expanding a little bit into audio as well. So we share quite a bit of their catalog. We also share ourselves and exchange basically content with other accessible libraries, and this can happen thanks to the Marrakesh Treaty. This treaty, the signed by I think around 40 countries, it was ratified 10 years ago, and it's a treaty that is meant to facilitate the access to a printed material in accessible formats. So basically, it's a copyright exemption that allows people to share published materials with this exemption to copyright from one country to another. And so it really saves some production work so that people don't double their efforts. And if somebody has a work available, they can choose to share it with the whole community of accessible libraries around the world. Finally, we also have we acquire regularly commercially produced audiobooks from Audible and Random House and other commercial audiobook producers. So these are basically our main ways of acquiring materials. So we keep talking about an accessible book. I think that maybe it's time to discuss that, but maybe before that, maybe if you have any questions that came up while we discussed CELA, because I think that's kind of a little chapter that's over. Then I will get into accessible books in general. Is there anything that came up or any questions or anything? If not,
so we don't have any questions.
Okay, so yet. Then we can just move on then, and right. Feel free to. But this would have been a moment if there was anything to jump in. Perfect. So let's move on to what is an accessible book then. What makes a book accessible? Very simply put, a book that is accessible is a book that everybody can read and use and understand. It is a book with features that make it possible basically to experience the book in all its dimensions. For example, an accessible audiobook is not just a book that plays from beginning to end, but it's specially formatted so that you can add bookmarks, navigate, for example, to sections and subsections and see the hierarchy of the structure of the book. You can add notes, and so that's what makes the experience accessible. And these accessible formats, you would need a specialized device or a specialized app to access such a. So what are the basically formats that are available for accessible books? They're audio, which is one of the more popular ones. Then there are the accessible ebooks, text-based formats, and of course, Braille. And so that's in general what an accessible book is. Let's see if my yes. So as to kind of paraphrase Marshall McLuhan with "the medium is the message," I would say that the accessible reading technology is the message. It really can shape the way you read, and I'm sure you've seen this also as you switched maybe from physical books to reading on your Kindle tablet or other e-readers. It affects how you read, and I have a funny story about that. When I used to read books on tape, and it was because you had to every hour or so change sides of the tape, I would keep track of time. And all of a sudden, when I first got a book that was all you could listen with it basically without interruptions, before I knew it, I had read through the night, and I was startled at 8 a.m. Somebody rang the door, and I was like, oh my God, tell me this. So I had to adapt. So all that to say is that reading technology does shape the way you read and the way you interact with your book. So what are the various, let's talk a bit about the reading technologies. What are the various adaptations that we can use to make print accessible? Some strategies are specific for each type of disability, but then there are also some that overlap. There are certain technologies that are useful for multiple types of print disabilities. Let's look a bit at the ones that are specific for each. In terms of visual print disabilities, we have Braille, of course. It can be embossed on paper, or as is in my case, electronic Braille that is displayed on a Braille display, which is what I am using now. It can, it basically connects to any device that has a screen, whether it's an iPhone, or a smartphone, or a tablet, or a computer, and it transforms with pins that move up and down what I'm reading into Braille. The other adaptation for low vision users is the screen magnification. And it's basically self-explanatory. Any screen that can be, the characters are being enlarged with specialized software, or also more and more devices include that out of the box, all these accessibility features. Another strategy for visually impaired users are captioning of images. And that is something that is important to be aware of as a publisher. It's always useful to include in your publishing files, to include the image descriptions. And I will talk more about those. And of course, this is true also in terms of making accessible social media posts. It's good practice to include alt text to give context to the images that are posted. I mean, that we could spend a long time just talking about image descriptions and good practices and what are the implications and AI, but that's not the scope of today. In terms of learning disabilities, there is, for example, the dyslexic font, and some of the settings you can adapt globally through the whole device, but there are very specific adaptations such as line spacing or margins and the type of highlight of cursor that you can set in specialized reading apps. And you will see one of these apps a little bit later in action. For physical disabilities, you have something that probably some of you have accidentally encountered by pressing the Shift key one too many times on the PC keyboard, are the sticky keys that allow you to use keyboard shortcuts. Instead of pressing all keys at once, you can press them one at a time. You also have various types of switches that can simulate mouse clicks or other, for people that cannot use the mouse or the keyboard. And there are many kinds of, including, for example, sip and puff technology that you use to breathe through, connected to a device, and you can inhale or exhale, and this will send commands to the connected device. Now, some adaptations that are useful for multiple use cases. Screen readers, of course, they're mainly used for translating what is available on the screen for visually impaired users. However, sometimes also it's useful for people with learning disabilities to easily have access to read aloud certain passages that are displayed on the screen to improve comprehension or reading fluence, to help with reading. There is, of course, the option to scan some print that would otherwise be inaccessible, and you would use OCR, whether you use it with a camera of your phone or with a scanner or other specialized device, and then you can import it in your technology of choice. Finally, one of the very popular options is the audio narration, and that is, I'm talking more about human narration here. Um, and of course, with specialized formats, like I was mentioning, one of the specialized formats is called DAISY, Digital Access to huh, Digital Access to Information, Digital Access Information System. Yes, that was it. Um, so that gives you all those navigation options and various uh, details that I was mentioning before. And these would be played on specialized devices and specialized apps, and you will see some of those in action. Finally, voice control. That is an emerging reading technology. And I will demo soon an accessible reading skill that CELA will be launching, that you can basically interact and control the reader through voice commands on your smart speaker. So let's move on. And what is this? Okay. An interesting phenomenon in terms of accessibility and how these technologies evolve, it's often happens throughout history, and I think the trend will continue, that often accessibility needs drive innovation, and they start off as features for accessibility, but then they make their way to the mainstream. So, for example, interestingly enough, the person who invented the LP record, who patented it, was right away envisioning the use case for using it for talking books. And they apparently collaborated with the libraries for the blind, for talking book libraries in the States, and were producing machines capable of playing those slower records, and so that more material can fit on a record. And then they made their way a few years later. They got released in the big market with for music lovers. And another good example is speed control. Everybody is used now to have an audiobook app or a podcast app on their favorite device that you can tell to speed up or slow down. But this feature was available first on specialized talking book machines for the blind. And I could go on. For example, I think there are many other examples, not in the reading technology, but for example, the first typewriter was invented to help people with print disabilities. So in many cases, and I think we'll see this with AI and other instances where applications that are first used by people with print disabilities will find their way in mainstream. So I've discussed enough of the theory. I think it's time to see some real action here. I want to present to you one of our newest additions in our CELA repertoire, so to say. That is called the Envoy Connect. We added it to our services, CELA services, 2 years ago. It's a small and affordable audiobook player, and it kind of does something very similar to those cheap MP3 players that you might purchase, that basically you can skip forwards and backwards through a book, and play and pause, and it will remember your reading position. So you might wonder, why am I talking about such a basic player in a presentation where we're talking about the future of reading technology? And the truth is that it's important to keep in mind that technology, as it advances, we need to keep in mind that many of the people that benefit from accessible reading technology also have cognitive limitations and are often, for example, we are now phasing out CDs from CELA's production. We used to offer books on CDs, and we still do, but it will end in a few months. And all the people that were used to just receive their books in the mail, put them in a device, and then basically needed minimal technological know-how, need to have an accessible option. And this player, we find, is just might be the solution for this use case, because it's simple, it has few buttons, and it's also very well constructed for accessibility. And we also offer the service for them to put it in the mail. They can send it for free to CELA. We erase the old books, put some new ones in, and send it back by mail. So if they're used to receiving their books by mail, this can continue with the Envoy Connect. So let's hear the Envoy Connect demo. We also have a for those that are more comfortable with technology, a way to manage the content on the player with an app called CELA Connect that you can download from our website. And I will demo this as well.
So as you can see, here is the Envoy Connect player. It is quite small, it's about the size of a deck of cards. So it is very simple to put it in an envelope and send it by mail for free to CELA so that it can be reloaded and sent back to you. I will focus on the accessibility specific features of this player. First of all buttons are very clearly labeled and I can identify them by touch. Then I will first play you some content so you can see the quality of the speaker, which I think is quite good given its size. And let's hear.
Last updated March 2023. What's in the box? Included in the box are the Envoy Connect player.
So this is actually the user guide that is preloaded on every player. So a user can receive it and right away learn how to use it simply by turning the player on. A next feature that I want to show you is I'm able, without seeing the LED button, to check the battery status. So if I press and hold the rewind button, we hear 3 beeps, so I know that the battery is fully charged. The last feature I want to show you is the solar panel. So on the back, we have a solar panel that allows me to go off grid and go camping and still be able to charge my player and listen to my favorite books. Let's move on now to the other method of adding and removing books on the Envoy Connect, which is the free app called CELA Connect.
We are now on the opening screen of the CELA Connect software. I will press enter to connect to the library.
Enter. Status read only edit. CELA Connect Envoy Connect.
Enter again.
Enter. Status read only edit.
By the way, I'm using the JAWS screen reader that tells me everything that is on my PC screen. After this connection with CELA Library has been established, we will have a list of books that are currently loaded on the player that we can choose to remove. And then we will move on to the next step, which will be downloading a book from the CELA bookshelf.
CELA Connect, select titles to remove. This is the list of titles on your Envoy Connect.
Now I can tab over to the list of books.
List view, not selected Ioana,
I have only one book, which I will press spacebar and select and press enter.
Enter. Status read only edit. Please.
We're at the next stage where we can choose a book to download. I will tab like previously.
List view, not selected Leviathan Wakes.
And
Book 1 of A Suitable Boy.
choose, let's say,
Indian in the Cabinet.
Indian in the Cabinet. I will press spacebar and enter. Now we get a confirmation dialog where we are asked to confirm whether we want to remove a book and download one book. Pressing enter again.
Enter. Status read only edit. Please wait checking your bookshelf.
After the book is downloaded, we will have a confirmation dialog telling us that it is safe to unplug the player. So now we have the confirmation message.
Message edit read only. Your content has been updated. You can now unplug the player.
I will press enter.
Enter.
And we are back where we started. Okay, so that's the Envoy Connect player that I want to now demo a specialized app for reading. This is called the Easy Reader. This app is basically available for any platform you can think of. It's available on iOS, Android, Amazon, tablets, PCs, and also for the Mac, with the exception that for the Mac you need a premium subscription to get access. And this app integrates with many accessible libraries, including CELA, so I could log in with my credentials and access my bookshelf directly, and I can add books to it, search for books in the CELA catalog. So it's quite well integrated with the CELA interface. And I will demo using this app now, on my iPhone with VoiceOver. I will now use VoiceOver, which is the screen reader for all iOS devices.
and open the Easy Reader
Braille
app.
screen input. EAS. Easy Reader. Opening Easy Reader. Portrait. Easy Reader. Loading. Ellipsis.
Here I will open the side menu to show you how we can access the CELA library directly from this app.
Side menu. CELA Library. Waiting for ellipsis. CELA Library.
Here we have two options. We can either search or browse for a book that we can add to our bookshelf, or I can go to the bookshelf where I have already added books, either through this app or through the web interface.
Direct to player bookshelf. Show results in direct to player bookshelf.
This app can open either DAISY audio or DAISY text. And DAISY just means that this is the specialized format with enhanced navigation possibilities that I will show you in a minute. I will look for the book Denison Avenue that is already on my bookshelf.
Denison Avenue, Christina Wong, Daisy. Denison Avenue, open, button.
I have already downloaded this book, so it shows me that I can open it.
Gongong 1, Gongong and Popo.
So it remembered my previous position. I will now demonstrate the navigation possibilities.
Play. Pre-book navigation, button. Selected. Headings, button. 1, level 1, 2%.
So it tells me that I'm on the first heading, and it is at level 1. Incidentally, all headings are at level 1 on this book.
Preface, level 1, 2%.
I will click on Preface.
Preface, vertical scroll, a novel, text settings.
As you can see here, we can change the text size, the foreground color, background color, margins, line spacing, and much more. Let's return.
Vertical scroll bar, 5 pages, 50.
I will now demonstrate reading with the help of the TTS, text-to-speech.
Play.
Preface. Our story primarily takes place in Toronto's Chinatown Kensington Market.
You can also change the speed and the quality of the voice in the audio settings of the app. So this gives you an overview of the Easy Reader functionality for improved accessibility.
Okay, moving along to the new kid on the block, as one could say, the Amazon skill that we are developing currently, and it's about to be launched, I think, within the coming month or months at the most. We're really in the last lap of the marathon to start the service. It is basically a way to access CELA content on any Amazon compatible Alexa device. We are not the only library that has turned to this technology. Other accessible libraries are exploring how to use, and they have put out some of them skills of their own. A skill is basically just Amazon's jargon for an app for the smart speaker. And in fact, also commercially produced audiobooks is from Audible, especially because Amazon owns Audible. They have made sure that it is possible to access your Audible library. So we already have a commercial correspondent in accessible reading because you can use your voice to read your Audible library. So I will demonstrate the various functions of this new skill, which of course has benefits for people with print disabilities, but also for people that are less technologically savvy. We've tried to keep the skill also as simple as possible. You may wonder why we didn't call it the CELA skill or something. As an anecdote, we had to find a name that translated well in English and French and didn't create misunderstandings. The Amazon's voice recognition had big problems with CELA and especially with Caraïbe in French. They thought we're talking about the Caraïbes, the Caribbean. But so we found a title that is more generic and works better. So I have edited the pauses between my requests and the responses of the speaker for timing efficiency. But it's really, they're not too long. They're maybe 2-3 seconds. And of course, they depend a little bit on the internet speed that you might have. But it's not quite as fast as you will see the reaction in the demo. Start Accessible Reading Canada.
Would you like to resume your most recent book in progress, access your books, or browse the library?
Resume.
Coming Together as Things Fall Apart by Astra Taylor. Narrated by Rebecca Mitchell.
Next.
Meanwhile, in the U.S., the new U.S.
Volume up.
magazine opined, for a long time now, people...
Stop. Start Accessible Reading Canada and Bookshelf.
You have 4 books on your bookshelf. First book, The Divine Comedy, by Dante Alighieri. Would you like to start reading or skip to the next book?
Help.
Your bookshelf is a list of books that you have chosen from our website or that have been selected for you based on your preferences. You can find them on the CELA website by selecting the direct player option for any audiobook. To navigate between the books on your bookshelf, say Previous or Next. To return to the main menu, say Main Menu.
Stop. Start Accessible Reading Canada and search for Your Brain on Music.
First result, The Teenager's Guide to the Real World, by Marshall Brain. Would you like to hear a summary, start reading, or skip to the next result?
Next.
This is Your Brain on Music, The Science of a Human Obsession, by Daniel J. Levitin. Summary, read or next?
Summary.
Neuroscientist and musician investigates the role of music in human evolution and daily life.
Main menu.
Would you like to resume your most recent book in progress, access your books, or browse the library?
Recommended books.
CELA regularly updates its list of recommended books.
Yes.
I have 3 recommended books. First book, Everyone on This Train is a Suspect, a novel, Ernest Cunningham No. 2, by Benjamin Stevenson. Would you like to hear a summary, start reading, or skip to the next one?
Stop.
Got it. Goodbye.
So, first of all, if the speaker speaks a little fast, you can change the speech speed, the reading speed of Alexa, and you can do that on any speaker. You can tell your speaker to speak slower or faster. I also basically the help command is available everywhere, so people that are new to the skill or less comfortable can ask for help at any time. We've tried to keep it simple. We went through a whole process where, first of all, we had 5 books, and you had to choose the number of the book that you were interested in. But then we realized that that could be difficult for some users. So then we just present 1 book at a time, and we tell them previous or next. So we've put in a lot of thought to try to make the cognitive load as small as and still keep it reasonably efficient. So that is the accessible skill, the Accessible Reading Canada skill that will be coming soon, as they say. So what is the future of where are we going in terms of accessible devices, and what are the future trends for these? It's interesting to note that 3D, the arrival of 3D printing technology has opened lots of avenues, for example, for building cheaper switches that for people with physical disabilities. And also the price for Braille displays is generally coming down. Some more lower cost Braille displays are available. There are also more and more features available on Braille displays. My Braille display that I'm using now, which is the HumanWare Brailliant 40, also, for example, includes an audio player, and I can download CELA books directly. I don't need to have a computer connected to it. I can just go to the online services and download audiobooks as well as textbooks that I can read on my Braille display. So it's a more standalone device. There is a great development that has just started to hit the market, but more in the education field because it's very, very expensive. It is the multi-line Braille display, because most Braille displays until now had only one line of Braille that you could display at a time. And this one, called the Monarch, can display not only text but also graphics. So you could imagine the applications in education where you can see an equation and also read the text of a manual rather than having to switch back and forth between a tactile map and then going back to your Braille text. So there are also, for example, there's another low cost, almost basically like a Windows computer, but instead of a screen, it has a Braille display. And the advantage of this one, or the promise, is that it's called the Optima, that it uses mainstream components, so it makes it easier to upgrade and keep up to date, because often specialized devices for accessibility, because they're for a smaller market, they don't have this, companies that don't have the same resources, so often they won't use the latest hardware that's available in mainstream devices. But this one holds the promise for easier upgrades. So that's a bit of an overview of where various reading devices are going. I should note also that the 3D technology is making the availability of 3D maps or other visual tactile materials interesting. And even, for example, you could use it for education. I've seen people printing out, for example, for anatomy, the human skeleton. And instead of using just some diagrams, you can have 3D printing making things more accessible. Yes, so we've covered, before I go into AI and other more publishing related aspects, if there are any questions now or any comments or anything, we can take a break and see if anything came up.
Sure, yeah, we've had a couple of questions come in. So actually, David, I'm going to give you the opportunity, since you've asked a few questions in here, if you would like to unmute yourself and ask your questions out loud, please feel free. So you've just turned your video on, so maybe you want to do your audio too. Go ahead.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I was wondering, I think you're probably going to go into the next part with AI, but I was wondering if you actually use any of the AI voices to create audiobooks.
You're ahead of me there. Yeah, I was getting there. That was my next part. I don't use them myself, and CELA does not. There have been some experiments made by NELS and the Network for Equitable Library Service. I think that's what that stands for. Anyway, so that's another organization that provides accessible books in Canada, and they did a study called How Do You Read? And they experimented with it. I think that for now, when they asked in 2019, mind you, but things changed so quickly, 90% of the respondents said that they prefer human narration, and that's not surprising. However, of course, there are some Audible now just started making tools for audio for AI voices available for publishing audiobooks. I would say it has its advantages in terms of easy, timely production of books. Of course, there are the ethical considerations, because there are places such as 11 Labs and others that give you the ability to clone somebody's voice, and you can make them say anything you want, and which creates very interesting possibilities, but also, of course, ethical possibilities, raises question marks. But in one word, no, CELA, we're not adopting any AI. Unless, what happened once or twice, we ingested books from the commercial audiobook producers. I think it was from Audible or some, and there we actually, it's not sometimes well indicated, and that's something that we would want to have, hopefully, guidelines that it should be indicated if a book is read by AI or not, because you might choose a different version if you have an option, if you want a human narration. And so we accidentally ingested some, but the AI was quite good. So it was you were left wondering whether it was a bad reader or a very good AI.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I've been playing with a new application called Speechify, and it's
yeah.
actually quite amazing what you can do with that. But also, I was wondering, do you produce other materials other than just books, like newspapers and
We do. We have a bunch of newspapers, about 45 of them, I think, na local and national and international ones. Those you can only access online, like a web page. So we don't have them as downloadable, but you would access them as you would any online web page. And we make these available for free for our users, including Globe and Mail and others. We have, I think, around 150 magazines that are mainly text-based. We have a few Braille magazines that are they can be sent in embossed Braille to users, or they can download them uh, on their Braille displays. So yeah, that's mainly, we don't, we have some books, like for example, for education, but they're mainly because of the fact that Bookshare provides books in various subjects, but we focus more on kind of the same type of books that you would find in a medium-sized public library kind of thing.
Okay, thank you. So can you subscribe to a number of newspapers through CELA or
I
how
think
does that work?
it's able for you to subscribe to magazines, and then they show up on your bookshelf. The newspapers, you just have to go to the CELA webpage, go to newspapers, and they're sorted by region or alphabetically, and you can search for the newspaper that you want to read. And we only make the current issue available. In other words, you cannot really search through back issues, but whatever is available that day, you will be able
Cool.
to consult on our webpage. In slightly altered form, like for example, we will not have the ads or other things. So there is a notable exception. Globe and Mail, we have needed to find an alternate solution for accessing that one. So Globe and Mail themselves have given CELA users full access of their webpage, which in a way is great. It also creates some problems because the webpage is quite busy. So we made sure to provide tutorials for accessing it using a screen reader and in general, because it is more a more complex interface than just the CELA webpage where you would have the stripped down text from other newspapers.
Right. So typically the
Mhm.
commercially available newspapers like Globe and Mail and Toronto Star and all these,
Yeah,
they're very inaccessible to people with screen readers. So
right.
if we go to your CELA webpage,
Uh-huh.
are they produced in a special format?
Yeah, they are provided by a sort of a different web feed. So it is the Toronto Star, for example, and you can click on certain articles, but it can be sometimes that not all content is available fully because the newspaper doesn't always send their entire content to the producer, to the accessible newspaper provider that sends us the info. But for Globe and Mail, we actually use the full site. But I have put together a detailed tutorial or for how to find the different sections, how to read a book, how to use the online reader that has quite a good AI voice for reading articles. Um, and you can also subscribe, for example, in the case of Globe and Mail, to their newsletter, and then you can get an email with the headlines and go from the email straight to the article that you find interested. So it's not ideal in terms of ease of use, but it is doable, and we've tried our best to document how to make use of the website.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. You provide a great service. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
So I'm actually curious, Ioana, about the magazines.
Yes.
Magazines are there's so much going on in them. They've got so many images and captions and ads. Would an audio version of the magazine have all of that in it?
I would assume that they are just providing the text of the and hopefully with image captions. I've seen some that clearly have captions of the image descriptions, and they are produced. So to answer your question, no, you will not have all the ads and everything, but I think you will have all the articles and more in a text-based form. And I wouldn't be surprised. I know you're asking a good question. I think there might be a way to download them because I think they have options with or without images, but I would need to double check.
There, that's that one is super interesting. So this next question, I'm not sure if you're the person that would be able to answer it, so it's okay if you're not. But if someone has experience, recording their own podcasts at home, do you think that that person would be able to record an accessible audiobook or audio reading material as well? Or is there something like special that would go into that recording process?
It's not as much the recording. Well, it depends. It depends on the book, for example. Like I think there are some practices that you would need to be aware of. For example, when you have names in the bibliography, or you would want them to also spell them out for people that are listening to it. So there are some practices that you would not typically do in commercially produced audiobooks that will enhance accessibility. But the key afterwards is not necessarily the recording that makes it accessible. Of course, you would want good enough quality and audio quality, but that's for anybody. But then it's the publishing it in an accessible way, the format, the packaging, if you will. And we only import, like we acquire books from our partners that produce them on demand, like I said, and these are, specific studios that produce the books in accessible format, or we get them through the commercial sources or sharing from libraries. Like we don't really get private, like if people want to volunteer and record, then they can better get in touch with the studios that would distribute these audiobooks. It wouldn't be with CELA directly that they would work. They would work with the studios. If that makes sense.
So the quality of your recording is extremely important. So I assume you don't do crowdsourcing for readers.
No, we do not. It's not like LibriVox or other.
Right.
So we only add either commercial or mind you, I mean, there are books, especially because we sometimes import books from other accessible libraries that are older and they were transferred from cassette tapes, and sometimes they are read by volunteers of those libraries, and sometimes they are read by multiple volunteers in the same book, and sometimes one is great and one is really not so good, and you're reluctant to criticize them because they're volunteers and you're happy that that's available. But so the quality can be a little unequal, but I would say that in general it went up substantially over just as it's become much easier to produce good quality audio and video and media in general. I would say that the quality is higher, and we try to avoid poorly produced material, but some might still be there from older archives.
Sure, that makes sense. So CELA as an organization does not produce these books. You would have arrangements with studios.
Yes.
So
CNIB produced some, and there are some, I don't know, like Vue et Voix. I don't know the names of all our partners that produce the studios, but you could definitely probably check with CELA. If not, and they might be able I can find out that information, who might best be able to. So, but yes, we only, somebody wishing to record books would reach those studios, and when we generally also we just acquire published books, really. We don't really get many self-published books unless it's something very relevant, because it's something related to print disabilities and we want to support those. But yeah, so I hope that kind of gives you a sense of the
absolutely.
of the process.
So it sounds a little bit then like CELA is not really in so much in control of which titles are available. It's kind of up to the studios in terms of which ones they produce.
No, but we can actually ask them. Like, for example, we have the Summer Reading Club books, and we can collaborate, and we try to make sure, one, that the libraries propose for summer reading for kids books that we have in our collection, but the other way around as well. So we try and we stay on top of the awards and make sure that we have those available in our collection. And so we do order, like I was mentioning, books, specific books to be produced. And in fact, we have a form on our webpage where patrons can suggest a title to be added to the collection. And of course, we cannot guarantee that we'll add all of those, but we certainly take them into account. And so, yeah, we do have some choice, absolutely, in terms of what we choose to produce or acquire.
If a publisher produces a book today, how long does it take to get it into audio format?
I would say it depends. But for example, we have had popular books such as, I remember, what was it? The book, I have a blank now. So some popular books become available to us almost at the same time as they become available on Audible because of our understanding with them. So I would say that tendentially the delay is getting smaller. But of course, if you need to custom produce it or do human transcription in Braille or other such features, which we also have available, then that can take longer. But I couldn't give you details. That would be more the collections manager that knows, because I just know when they appear in the catalog. I'm not too sure when they were ordered.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for taking all of these questions. It's just such an interesting topic, but we will let you get back to your presentation now.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Oh, yes. So let's discuss, now that we've discussed a little bit the role of when we're talking a bit about publishing audiobooks, I wanted to take a moment to discuss the Born Accessible movement. This applies to publishing, but not just publishing, but in general, this is a philosophy about incorporating accessibility. And the idea is that whether it's a design of a product or a building or a book, it's important to take into account accessibility features from the source and not after the fact. It's much easier to have robust accessibility included from the beginning. And for example, that's what I was mentioning already, the descriptions of images, and it's very good if the publisher could make those available and incorporate them in their content so that they can be used to create accessible formats, or if their format is used as such, to have that available, that information. So a well-created accessible EPUB format. So the EPUB is one of the more popular formats for publishers. They can be used to then more easily turn this into Braille, for example. Between 2019 and 2024, the Department of Canadian Heritage provided $22.8 million to the Accessible Book Fund to support the production and distribution of accessible digital books by Canadian independent publishers, and basically to support this Born Accessible movement. Another significant development in this field is the European Accessibility Act, which will go into effect in June this year, so just around the corner. And it basically directs that all digital books sold in the EU marketplace must be accessible. Now, what this will mean and how quickly this will be implemented and what exactly means accessible, it doesn't mean that everything will magically be perfectly accessible for everybody, but it is a big step in terms of inclusivity and, as we mentioned, making more content available, and people might not need to wait so long to get a book published and then adapted. the Born Accessible would significantly shorten, if not diminish completely, that delay. Why doesn't the Braille display refresh? That would be useful. Oh, yes. So how does CELA contribute to all these initiatives in terms of publishing? We participate in various research projects, and one has just recently completed in March, and I was privileged to take part in shaping this one and seeing it develop. The commercial audiobook project, and what it had as a goal, it was funded first of all by the Accessibility Standards Canada, and the goal was basically to understand the landscape of and the state of accessibility for audiobooks, and also to develop guidelines for best practices for publishers. You might think, well, an audiobook is accessible because it's audio, but it's not necessarily the case. As we discussed, if you have an audiobook produced in one large file that you have no way of navigating, that although it's audio, it's not really accessible. So the way we did this, we had a small, well, a number of participants. It wasn't a large study, but it had to be manageable and also reasonably feasible. So we asked both people with and without print disabilities to listen to various samples of books with different features in the way they were produced, and give their opinions. And some of the main very interesting insights were that often both readers with and without print disabilities share similar needs and preferences for audiobooks. For example, even people without print disabilities were sometimes quite happy to hear a description of an image, because often you read an audiobook in your car, you don't have the physical book available, and it was enjoyable to have a well-done audio description of an image included in the book. The same with the footnotes or other material that often is not included in commercial audiobooks. So the good news, I think, for publishers and for everybody is that if they make the books more accessible, it might enhance the experience for everyone. However, the other insight is that there is a clear need for customization of audiobooks. And in here, of course, a good collaboration between the book producers and the reading platforms is important, because, for example, some readers may choose to hear the description of the cover image of the book, and some may not. And it might depend on the book if you want to hear the footnotes or not. So it would be great to have the ability, and there is the ability technically already, to make some elements skippable so that you could choose to hear them or not in the book. You set your preferences and then the book behaves accordingly, except that, again, this is something where publishers and platform reading technology producers need to come together and collaborate to create good standards. We asked our participants in the study to give us a wish list of features they would like to see, and two of the main ones were the ability to be able to search for a precise word in an audiobook, in a human narrated audiobook. That would be very useful. There are many people that don't just read for leisure, but they want to study or give a quote in a specific book, and then it's useful to be able to have access to. It would be ideal if you could have access to the search capability within an audiobook. And the other big one is the synchronization between text and audio. So you could seamlessly switch between the text of a book and the audio. And this is possible when you have text to speech, but it is not at all widely spread as a feature in terms of human narrated audiobooks. I mean, we have what Amazon is doing. If you buy both the audiobook and the electronic book, you can switch between one and the other, but not everybody wants to buy the same book twice so that they can have this feature. On another project that CELA is participating in, and it's very interesting for me to be part of that one as well, is a collaboration with the DAISY organization, which is that an international organization that concerns itself with everything accessible reading and formats and etc. And they, CELA focused in our study on the publisher side of things, and they are focusing on the reading apps user requirements project. And this project is ongoing, and there we're doing kind of the opposite. We're asking what would we want from a reading platform. So I think that there is work being done on both sides, and all I can say is we hope that they'll meet somewhere in the middle, and slowly the standards for producing and for producing books and for accessible reading technology will bring these features to more and more users. Now, it's so funny. This. Yes, so as kind of a recap of all we've gone over, there are basically what are the trends for the future for all these technologies and accessible reading experiences. We can see that the technology is evolving, and the prices, the specialized devices become less and less expensive. They become smaller and more multifunctional. They incorporate more and more features that you might find on mainstream devices. So, you can find now Braille displays that have email and note takers, and you could browse the internet. They're almost like mini computers. And you have mainstream devices, on the other hand, that include more and more accessibility features, such as, even Windows and all devices have some kind of screen reader and magnification and other screen adaptation and voice control commands, so that you can use your voice to control your device. So basically what we can, and also we can just hope that both of them, there is sort of, each of them is reaching towards the other, and they'll meet somewhere in the middle. There'll be more and more accessibility features on mainstream devices and more powerful features on accessibility specific devices. So everybody can choose whatever suits them best at a lower and lower price point. That's the hope. And so yeah, basically that, and also the production of born accessible books, and whether AI can assist also with the image descriptions or in production, and to facilitate the production in various ways. The CDs will be replaced clearly with lower cost, low-tech devices such as the Envoy Connect. CDs are basically, or there are also some high-tech devices that have feature that you could possibly like mail storage devices back and forth and then receive it back with new load of books. So efforts are being made on the low tech end of things as well. So AI can help with the scanning and the narration of printed material, but that's a very new emerging field. And so really all what we can hope is that the cost, that in the future, I mean, we can only dream that the cost of a book will be the same, that you can get a book accessibly with the same cost and maintaining the same quality and published at the same time. That would be the ideal goal and dream for an accessible reading future. So that kind of concludes my main presentation. Here I have one more slide about basically where you can contact me, and the CELA webpage. And I will send this PowerPoint to you, Lauren, and so everybody that's interested can have it. Yeah, so that's kind of I think we've done the tour. If you guys have any other questions and any comments, I'm all ears. Thank you very much.
That was fantastic, Ioana. Thank you so much. I have copied your email address and put it into the chat for everyone. So if you're not seeing the slides, you can find the contact information there. And as mentioned, I will be sharing out the PowerPoint file afterwards as well. this is all just so interesting to me, and I honestly could like ask you questions about this forever. I do want to make sure though that I mention that Windsor Public Library, which is the library local for Windsor Hackforge, is a CELA member. So anyone who is not currently taking advantage of CELA's options, you can do so by signing up with Windsor Public Library. I'm going to put a link to their accessibility services page in the chat as well, so folks can look them up and reach out if they're interested. So you'd mentioned in part of your end there, born accessible formats, I think you said. So,
well, born accessible publishing, basically.
Publishing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what does that mean?
It maybe means that you create a book that has, for example, that doesn't use that uses properly formatted layout. For example, there is books that have a fixed layout for images and stuff often don't read well with adaptive technology. So there are some, and there are all sorts of guidelines. There is the website accessiblepublishing.org that you could look at, that has all sorts of guidelines for publishers, how to make the text and the formats, what formats they can use. So the EPUB format that is used by, and we're working now on guidelines for EPUB 3, and it might even include the ability to synchronize text and audio if publishers choose to implement that. But born accessible basically just means that it is created with accessibility features in mind. One of them, I'm not a publishing expert, but like I don't know all the technical terms, but one of them, for example, is this ability to reflow the text. So if you're changing the font size and stuff, the page layout needs to adapt accordingly, and that is up to the publisher to create the book in a way that this is made possible. They have to have a good well-formatted table of contents in their e-text so that you could find specific chapters, and they have to be well marked. If you say section 1, 2, 3, that doesn't help me to know the title, for example. So there are specific accessibility considerations that a publisher can take into account. So born accessible is ideally you have a book that you can buy and have a perfectly accessible experience without needing to adapt it in any way. And I would say that already, like Audible, if you play the apps in the Audible app, they have quite good naming of files, and you can add bookmarks and add clips. So there is the downside with Audible is that you are, of course, locked into a specific platform. So if somebody doesn't feel comfortable with that specific platform, then they are stuck. So yes, I don't know if does that answer your question, kind of?
Yes, no, that's very helpful. And I find it interesting that you mentioned, Audible and being stuck in with that one platform, because that's really happening now, even with Amazon's ebooks, right?
Right.
Before, when you purchased an ebook for your Kindle, you at least owned the file, could put it somewhere else, but not anymore. So that
not anymore. You need to be very creative. There is the Caliper. And I will do some experimentation because I think that it should be possible, but so I'm just trying to see if there is a way to import the EPUB files from CELA, the text files, into the Kindle library so that they could be read by text-to-speech on your smart speaker. And because the smart speaker can not only read Audible, they can also read Kindle books as long as they're in your Kindle library. So I'm trying now to figure out how best to import CELA books. I think it's possible, but I have to see if the process is realistically accessible for people that are not as hacker-minded as I am. But yeah, so indeed, everybody wants to lock you in their platform in everything, unfortunately, instead of having an open concept. And that can have more impact on people that have accessibility challenges.
Absolutely. So you mentioned Caliber in there, which is a fantastic application. So I did just put a link to the Caliber website into the chat if anybody's interested in looking them up. We did have a question from the audience. So Ellen is curious to know if there's a Braille Kindle.
Yes and no. Well, there is, like I said, there are some Braille note takers, and for example, my device can use Wi-Fi and connect to to online services where they can download books. Right now, Braille displays are specialized devices, so you can some may support downloading from specialized libraries such as CELA, but you will not have an Amazon tablet that you buy on the market that happens to have Braille on it. There might be, and I haven't tried this out, but I don't know how robust the Braille support is for Kindle in terms of connecting it to a Braille display, but you will not find the same as an iPhone, as a computer. It doesn't have a Braille display incorporated in it, but you can connect it. I can use my Braille display with my iPhone. In fact, I sometimes I charge my iPhone in another room, and I have my Bluetooth headset and my Bluetooth Braille display, and I'm reading things and accessing and writing emails with my Braille display. And my husband is like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "I'm working on my iPhone." "Well, where's your phone?" I don't know, actually. It's somewhere in the other room. So there is no Kindle per se that you buy and has Braille out of the box, but it might have Braille support, but I don't know how robust Amazon's Voice View screen reader support is for that. I think it's worth just doing a search. I would need to do a search about Voice View. That's the screen reader for Amazon devices and their Braille support. I would say that even Apple is quite strong in that field. Even the Apple TV, I sometimes watch foreign movies and I read the subtitles in Braille on the Braille display, which is very nice to be able to do.
That's really cool. I did not know that that was something you could do.
Yeah, it sometimes can be a little challenging, and it's not flawless. Sometimes if the subtitle takes too long, is quite a sometimes the Braille display skips some lines, and if you're not a fast Braille reader, then you will not always be able to keep track, to keep pace. But it is definitely, I think it's a great way to incentivize like people practicing their Braille skills. Yeah, it's really very interesting that that's possible. My hope, and that's a different field, is that with audio description, one day you would be able to have the audio description track on a separate app. And it is physically possible, and it has been done before, but there are copyright restrictions that don't allow you to just have the audio track for the audio description in your headphones, so that not everybody that watches TV with you needs to listen to the audio description. But that's a whole other field. I won't get into that one. But yeah.
That's so interesting. Copyright does confuse a lot of things there. I think it's interesting where Alan is going with that, though. So when you are using your Braille display to read a book, is it showing you multiple lines at a time, or do you have to like?
I have to pan. My Braille display displays 40 characters at a time. So I can, mind you, 40 characters when you're reading what is called contracted Braille. Sometimes one word can be contracted into, like, for example, knowledge. You write just the letter K, and you have to know this code, and you know that the word is knowledge. So I will read slightly more in contracted Braille, and then you pan, but it can be quite fluent. In fact, some people even read quite successfully on 20 character cells. The advantage is that they're more portable. There are multi-line Braille displays, and I'm a musician, and so sometimes when you read music Braille, then it is nice to have multiple lines of Braille displayed, especially if you play piano and then you want to read the left hand and the right hand at the same time. Then it is much nicer to have a Braille display with multiple lines, but they're very expensive. Like mine that has 40 cells, and It's about $4,000 or easily, if not more. There are some lower costs, but not much lower. I don't think we find anything right now that's much lower than 2,000 or so. But I don't quote me on the prices, but they are not cheap. But they do. I mean, I remember my first Braille display when I was at university was around 10,000. So they do go down in price, but they're not. They're not cheap.
So interesting. I never even thought about like music notation in Braille before. That is a whole separate conversation from what we're
Oh, it is.
today,
And Louis
but
Braille, he
whoa.
was a musician. He invented at the same time the Braille alphabet for writing and for music, really at the same time. So they
So
both exist.
whoa. Oh my gosh. I want to just hang out with you and ask you so many questions. Like all of this is so very interesting. I love it. Wow. I don't want to monopolize this conversation though. So folks in the chat, if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and feel free to ask. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. You can type it out and I can read it out for you, whatever you are most comfortable with. Even if it's just a question, something that we discussed earlier, but you want to go back to, if you'd like to perhaps see one of the slides that came through earlier, you can do that as well. Up to you guys. But I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight. This has been so cool. I am so interested in everything that I learned, and I'm excited to look a little bit more into some of the topics that we discussed. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I was just thinking, for people that might consider joining CELA, it's interesting to know that you could even join CELA temporarily. Let's say if somebody had an eye operation and for a few months they cannot read anything because of this operation, for that time they could apply for CELA services. So it's not something that it needs to be a permanent condition. I mean, of course we do require people to stop using the services when they don't need them anymore, if they don't need them. And but it's just worth knowing that it could be something that can be used on a temporary basis if the needs warranted.
That is absolutely worth knowing. Thank you for pointing that out. I didn't realize that was an option. Very cool. All right. Well, it looks like the chat has asked their questions. So thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. We appreciate having you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ioana. I hope that you have yourself a great evening, and pet your dog Cheerio for me, because oh my gosh, dogs, especially a dog named Cheerio, that's the best.
It is. And she's an amazing guide dog. She's something else. Yeah.
Oh, I bet. Lovely. Well, you enjoy your evening.
Thank you very much. Same to you. Thanks for inviting me. It was a real pleasure. And yeah,
lovely.
Have a nice evening.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye.